The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for 40 years. Children ran through the streets on their way to school. Farmers checked their crops in the fields outside the main city. Mothers and fathers prepared for another ordinary day. Nobody knew that this would be the last sunrise they would ever see. New Haven was humanity's proudest colony. It sat on the edge of known space, a green and blue world that reminded everyone of Earth. More than 2 million people called it home. They had built hospitals, schools, parks, and neighborhoods. They had created a life far from the world of their ancestors, but they carried Earth in their hearts. Commander Cole stood on the balcony of the military station, drinking his morning coffee. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a calm voice. His job was simple. He watched the sky and kept the colony safe. For 5 years, nothing had ever happened. New Haven was peaceful. It was boring. Often joked that he had the easiest job in the galaxy. Dr. Amy was already at the hospital when her communicator buzzed. A child had fallen from a tree and broken his arm. She smiled as she walked to the emergency room. These were the problems she loved to solve. Small injuries, worried parents, happy endings. She had no idea that in a few hours there would be no hospital left to walk through. Governor Grant sat in his office, reading reports about crop yields and water supplies. He was an older man with white hair and a kind face. The people of New Haven had elected him 3 times because he listened to them. He cared about their problems. He wanted their children to have better lives. He was thinking about his granddaughter's birthday party next week when his assistant rushed through the door. "Sir," the young woman said, her face pale, "there are ships in orbit, many ships." Stood up slowly. "What kind of ships?" "Sir, hundreds of them." The Dominion had warned humanity before. They claimed that this region of space belonged to them. They called it sacred territory. Earth's leaders had tried to talk to them to find a peaceful solution, but they did not believe in peace. They believed in power. They had conquered 12 species over 800 years. They saw humanity as nothing more than insects building nests where they did not belong. Commander Cole saw the ships appear in the sky. At first, there were 10, then 50, then more than he could count. They blotted out the sun like a swarm of metal locusts. His hands began to shake as he ran to the communication center. "This is New Haven Colony to Earth Command," he said into the transmitter. "We have a fleet in orbit. Repeat, fleet in orbit, requesting immediate assistance." There was static, then silence, then a voice from one of his officers. "Sir, they are charging weapons." Closed his eyes. Earth was too far away. No help would arrive in time. He opened his eyes and spoke again into the transmitter. "They are going to attack. Tell Earth. Tell everyone, remember us." The first blast hit the Capitol building. Governor Grant never saw it coming. One moment he was reaching for his communicator to warn the people. The next moment he was gone. The building collapsed in a ball of fire and smoke. Dr. Amy heard the explosion from the hospital. She ran to the window and saw the sky filled with light. Ships were firing down at the city, one blast after another. Buildings fell. Streets burned. People screamed and ran in every direction, but there was nowhere to run. She grabbed as many children as she could and pulled them into the basement. She held them close and told them everything would be okay. She lied to them because that was all she could do. The last thing she heard was the sound of the hospital crumbling above her. Commander Cole kept transmitting until the very end. His voice was calm even as the station shook around him. "They are targeting everything," he said. "Civilian areas, schools, hospitals, they are killing everyone. This is not war, this is murder. If anyone can hear this, please remember what happened here. Remember New Haven. Remember that we were peaceful. We never wanted this. We just wanted to live." The transmission ended with static. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, New Haven was silent. The beautiful green fields were black and burned. The cities were nothing but rubble and ash. The rivers that once sparkled in the sunlight were filled with dust and death. Not a single building stood. Not a single voice called out. 2,300,000 people, men and women, the elderly and the young, children who had never hurt anyone, all of them were gone. The fleet hung in orbit for one more hour. They scanned the surface to make sure nothing lived. When they were satisfied, they sent a message to Earth. It was short and cold. This is the consequence of defiance. Know your place among the stars. Then they left. They returned to their empire, confident that humanity had learned its lesson. They believed that these soft, emotional creatures would weep and beg for peace. They believed that humans would finally understand that they were the masters of this galaxy. They were wrong. When the message reached Earth, it was the middle of the night in most major cities. Leaders were pulled from their beds. Military commanders rushed to their stations. News networks interrupted their broadcasts. Within hours, every human being on Earth and every colony knew what had happened. At first, there was silence. People stood in the streets, staring at screens, unable to believe what they were seeing. Then came the tears. Millions of people wept for strangers they had never met. They wept for children who would never grow up. They wept for a colony that had done nothing wrong except exist. But after the tears came something else, something they had not expected, something they could not understand. Anger. Not the hot, quick anger that burns out fast. This was cold. This was deep. This was the kind of anger that does not shout or scream. It waits. It plans. It remembers. Humanity had been wounded before. They had survived wars and plagues and disasters. They had always found a way to continue. But this was different. This was not a natural disaster. This was not an accident. This was a message written in the blood of innocent people. And humanity would send a message of its own. The stars had never seen anything like what was coming. The reconnaissance ship moved through space in complete silence. Its crew of 30 had not spoken in hours. They all knew where they were going. They all knew what they would find. But knowing something and seeing it are two very different things. Captain Manning stood at the front of the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a man who had seen many things in his 20 years of service. He had fought pirates. He had rescued survivors from damaged ships. He had looked death in the face and never blinked. But today, his hands were shaking. 5 minutes to arrival, said the navigation officer. Nodded but did not speak. What could he say? What words existed for a moment like this? Lieutenant Torres sat at the communications station. She was young, only 26 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes that usually sparkled with energy. Today, those eyes were red from crying. She had a cousin on New Haven, a little girl named Sophie who loved to draw pictures of spaceships, had promised to visit her next month. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the planet appeared on the main screen. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. New Haven was gone. The world that had once been green and blue was now brown and gray. Massive burn marks covered the surface like wounds on skin. The oceans were dark with ash. The cities that had once glittered with lights were nothing but shadows. "Begin scanning," said quietly. The crew worked in silence, searching for any sign of life, any signal, any hope, but there was nothing. The planet was dead. "Captain," one of the officers said, his voice breaking, "I am reading over 2 million deceased, no survivors detected." Closed his eyes for a moment. 2 million people, families, friends, children, all gone in a single day. "Prepare a landing team," he said. "We need to document everything." The shuttle descended through the gray sky. When it landed on what used to be the main street of the capital city, the team stepped out into a world of silence. There were no birds singing, no wind in the trees because there were no trees left, just ash and rubble stretching in every direction. Lieutenant Torres walked through the ruins of what had been a school. The walls were collapsed. The desks were burned. She found a small backpack buried under the debris. Inside was a lunchbox with a cartoon character on it and a notebook filled with a child's handwriting. She opened the notebook. The first page had a drawing of a house with a family standing in front of it. Underneath, in messy letters, a child had written, "My home on New Haven. I love it here." Fell to her knees. She held the notebook to her chest and wept. She wept for the child who had drawn this picture. She wept for Sophie, who she would never see again. She wept for every soul that had been taken from this world. The team spent 3 days on the surface, collecting evidence and recording everything. They found toys and photographs, wedding rings and baby shoes. They found the remains of the hospital where Dr. Amy had tried to save the children. They found the military station where Commander Cole had sent his final message. When they returned to Earth, the whole world was waiting. Admiral met them at the dock. She was a woman of 60 years with silver hair and a face carved from stone. She had commanded fleets and won battles that seemed impossible. But when Captain Manning handed her the notebook with the child's drawing, her stone face cracked. A single tear rolled down her cheek. The evidence was broadcast across every human world. People gathered in public squares and living rooms. They watched the footage of the burned planet. They saw the personal belongings of the dead. They heard Commander Cole's final transmission, his calm voice describing the murder of his people. For 1 week, humanity mourned. Vigils were held on every colony. Candles were lit in every city on Earth. Strangers hugged each other in the streets. Political enemies stood side by side in silence. Religious leaders of every faith prayed together. The divisions that had separated humanity for centuries simply disappeared. Then came the meeting of the United Planetary Council. Leaders from every nation and colony gathered in the Great Hall. The room was silent as Admiral walked to the podium. She did not carry notes. She did not need them. Her words came from somewhere deeper than memory. "I have served humanity for 40 years, she began. "I have always believed in peace. I have always believed that reasonable beings can find ways to live together without violence. I was wrong." She paused, looking out at the assembled leaders. They do not want peace. They want submission. They killed 2.3 million innocent people to send us a message. They believe we are weak. They believe we will accept this and learn our place. Her voice grew harder. "They murdered our children. They burned our people alive. They did this not in the heat of battle, but as a cold and calculated act of terror. And now they sit in their empire, laughing at our grief, confident that we will do nothing." Admiral leaned forward. "I stand before you today not to call for calm, not to urge restraint. I stand before you to say what every human being already knows in their heart. This cannot stand. This will not stand. They think we will accept this. They are wrong." The vote was unanimous. Every single leader from every nation and colony raised their hand. For the first time since humanity had taken to the stars, a declaration of total war was issued. Not a war of conquest, not a war of greed, a war of justice, a war of memory, a war to tell the galaxy that humanity would never forget its dead. Outside the council hall, billions of people watched the announcement, and for the first time since the attack, the tears stopped. In their place came something else, a fire in the eyes, a steel in the spine, a promise written on every human face. They had awakened something ancient, something primal, something they could not possibly understand. They had touched humanity's children. And now humanity was coming for them. The day after the declaration of war, something remarkable happened. People stopped fighting each other. Old arguments were forgotten. Political enemies shook hands. Nations that had been rivals for centuries began to work together. Humanity moved as one organism with one heart and one purpose. Admiral Ben Carter was appointed Supreme Commander of the Retribution Fleet. He was a quiet man of 52 years with gray temples and steady hands. He had never sought fame or glory. He had simply done his duty, day after day, year after year. Now the entire species was looking to him for leadership. He accepted the responsibility with 3 simple words: for New Haven. Captain Hayes was assigned to lead the Vanguard fleet. She was known throughout the military as a tactical genius, a woman who could see patterns in chaos and find victory where others saw only defeat. She had studied every battle in human history, and many alien ones too. She spent her nights dreaming of strategies and her days turning those dreams into plans. Chief Engineer Tony was given the task of designing the new warships. He was a large man with grease-stained hands and a brilliant mind. He had built ships his whole life, but he had never built anything like what he was about to create. The council had asked him for weapons of war. He would give them weapons of justice. Every shipyard in human space began working around the clock. Factories that had made cars and appliances were converted to produce ship components. Mines that had been closed for decades were reopened. Scientists who had been working on medicines and technologies redirected their efforts to weapons systems. The entire economy of 37 human worlds transformed overnight. Volunteers appeared by the millions. Young men and women lined up outside recruitment centers before the sun rose. Retired soldiers came back to service. Engineers quit their jobs to work in the shipyards. Teachers, doctors, farmers, and artists all found ways to contribute. Nobody had to be forced. Nobody had to be convinced. They all knew why they were doing this. The Dominion watched from across the galaxy with amusement. Their spies sent reports about the human mobilization. Commanders laughed when they read the numbers. Humans were building ships, yes, but what did that matter? They had the most powerful fleet in the known galaxy. They had conquered 12 species. They had never lost a war in 8 centuries. High Command, the leader of the military, dismissed the reports with a wave of his clawed hand. "Let them build their toys," he said. "When they come, we will crush them like we crush the others. They will learn submission as all species do." But they did not understand something important about humans. They did not understand that humans were different from the other species they had conquered. Humans did not surrender when the odds were against them. Humans did not accept defeat. Humans found ways to win even when winning seemed impossible. Chief Engineer worked without sleep for months. He designed a new class of warship, bigger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. He called it the Titan class. These ships were so massive that when analysts first detected them on long-range scans, they classified them as space stations. They could not believe that any species would build mobile vessels of such size. Captain Hayes developed new tactics that threw away everything they expected. She studied their battles against other species and found patterns in their strategies. They were predictable. They used the same formations, the same approaches, the same methods that had worked for centuries. They had never needed to adapt because they had always been stronger than their enemies. Hayes smiled when she realized this. Strength was useless if you could not hit your target. Speed and flexibility would defeat power and tradition. They would not know what hit them. 18 months passed. The shipyards never stopped. Workers collapsed from exhaustion and were replaced by others who had been waiting for their turn. Families said goodbye to sons and daughters, husbands and wives, knowing they might never see them again. But nobody complained. Nobody questioned. They all understood that this was bigger than any individual. This was about the future of their species. On the day the fleet was completed, Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty and looked out at what humanity had created. 500,000 warships stretched across space as far as the eye could see. Carriers filled with fighters, destroyers bristling with weapons, cruisers designed for speed and precision, and at the heart of the formation, 100 Titan-class dreadnoughts, mountains of steel and fury. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by any known species in the history of the galaxy. Admiral Carter addressed the fleet commanders through the communication network. His voice was calm and steady, as it always was. "We do not go to conquer," he said. "We do not go to enslave. We do not go to become the monsters that attacked our people. We go to deliver justice. We go to show the galaxy that humanity protects its own. We go to make sure that no species ever again believes they can murder our children without consequence." He paused for a moment. "Some of you will not return. I will not lie to you about that. War is cruel and many good people will fall before this is over. But know this, your sacrifice will not be forgotten. 1,000 years from now, humans will still tell the story of what we did here. They will remember that when our people were slaughtered, we did not hide. We did not beg. We rose up as one and we answered." The Admiral's voice grew stronger. "For New Haven, for every soul they took, for every child who will never grow up, for every parent who will never hold their baby again, we go to remind the universe of a simple truth. You do not touch humanity's children." The fleet began to move. 500,000 ships turned toward space. The engines roared to life. The stars themselves seemed to shiver as humanity began its march across the galaxy. In the Dominion, the festival of conquest continued. They celebrated their power and their victories. They toasted to their superiority over lesser species. They had no idea what was coming for them. Prime was celebrating. It was the Festival of Dominion, the most important holiday in the calendar. For 3 days, the Empire remembered its conquests. Parades filled the streets of the capital. Soldiers marched in perfect formation. Citizens cheered and waved flags decorated with the symbols of the 12 species they had crushed over 8 centuries. Overseer, the political leader of the Dominion, stood on his balcony and watched the celebrations with satisfaction. His empire was strong. His people were proud. The humans had been taught their lesson, and soon they would come crawling to beg for peace. Everything was as it should be. High Commander was less relaxed. Something was bothering him, a feeling he could not explain. His scouts had reported that the human fleet was moving, but the numbers they sent back seemed wrong. Too large. Impossible. He dismissed the reports as sensor errors and tried to enjoy the festival, but the feeling would not go away. Lieutenant Commander Sam Griffin stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching the countdown on his display. He was Admiral Carter's tactical officer, a young man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. In 3 minutes, the human fleet would drop out of faster-than-light travel directly in front of Prime. In 3 minutes, they would understand what they had awakened. "All ships report ready," he said to the Admiral. Carter nodded slowly. "Begin final approach." The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a wave breaking on a shore. One moment, the space around Prime was empty. The next moment, it was filled with ships. So many ships that the sensors could not count them all. So many ships that they blocked the light from the distant stars. In the command center, technicians stared at their screens in disbelief. The numbers did not make sense. 500,000 warships. That was more than any species had ever fielded in a single battle. That was more than the had built in their entire 800-year history. High Commander felt his blood run cold. This was not possible. Humans were young and weak. They could not have built such a force. It had to be a trick, some kind of sensor deception. But it was not a trick. "All defense fleets engage immediately," ordered, his voice steady despite his fear. "Show these creatures the true power of the Dominion." 18,000 warships rose to meet the human armada. It was the largest defense fleet that had ever assembled and was confident it would be enough. His ships were veterans. His commanders were experienced. They had never lost. Captain Hayes led the vanguard into battle. Her voice was calm as she issued orders through the fleet network. "Remember your training, stay flexible, adapt to their movements. They are predictable. We are not." The two fleets clashed in a storm of light and fire. Weapons blazed across space, seeking human targets, but the human ships were not where they expected them to be. Hayes had developed new formations that changed and shifted like water. Where they fired, there was empty space. Where they did not fire, human weapons found their marks. They fought in rigid lines as they had for centuries. They moved in predictable patterns that Hayes had memorized and countered. When they turned left, human ships were already waiting on their right. When they advanced, human ships flanked them from above and below. When they retreated, human ships cut off their escape. The Titan-class dreadnoughts were devastating. Their weapons could destroy a cruiser with a single shot. Their shields absorbed punishment that would have torn lesser ships apart. They moved through the formation like giants walking through a field of grass, leaving destruction in their wake. Lieutenant Commander Griffin tracked the battle on his tactical display. They were losing ships at an alarming rate, 300 in the first hour, 800 in the second, 2,000 by the third. Their formations were falling apart. Their commanders were panicking. Their proud fleet was being torn to pieces. High Commander watched the disaster unfold from his command ship. He had never seen anything like this. Species were supposed to break when they faced power. They were supposed to flee and beg for mercy. But these humans did not break. They pressed forward with cold efficiency, destroying everything in their path. "Retreat," ordered finally. "All ships retreat to defensive positions around the—" But it was too late. Captain Hayes had anticipated the order. Human ships had already moved to block the retreat routes. The fleet was surrounded. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, the defense force was gone. Scattered wreckage floated through space where 18,000 warships had once stood. A few hundred survivors fled into the darkness, too damaged to fight, too afraid to stay. Admiral Carter opened a channel that broadcast on all frequencies. His voice echoed across Prime and every ship in the system. "This is Admiral Ben Carter of the United Human Fleet. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to discuss terms. We are here because you killed 2.3 million people who were simply living their lives. They were not soldiers. They were not threats. They were families, children, innocent souls who wanted nothing more than to exist in peace." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Look upon what remains of your fleet. Look at the power that surrounds your world. Understand what you have done. You thought humans were weak. You thought we would accept the murder of our people. You thought wrong." On Prime, the celebrations had stopped. Citizens stared at the sky in terror. The human fleet hung above them like a judgment, 500,000 ships waiting in silence. Overseer felt something he had never felt before. Fear, true fear. The humans had not come to talk. They had not come to threaten. They had come to end everything they had built. High Commander stood in the ruins of his command center, surrounded by dead screens and broken equipment. His fleet was gone. His empire was defenseless. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be on the other side. He understood what it felt like to face a power that could not be stopped. The humans had arrived, and they were about to learn what happens when you touch humanity's children. The silence that followed the battle was heavier than any weapon. 500,000 human warships hung in the sky above Prime, and they could do nothing but wait. Their fleet was destroyed. Their defenses were gone. For the first time in 800 years, they were completely helpless. Across the galaxy, 12 conquered species watched in stunned amazement. They had served for generations, believing that the Dominion was unbeatable. Now they saw human ships surrounding and they began to understand that the universe had changed. Overseer broadcast desperate messages on every frequency. His voice, which had once commanded billions with absolute authority, now trembled with fear. "We can negotiate," he pleaded. "We can offer territory, resources, whatever you want. Name your price and it is yours. There is no need for more violence. We can find a peaceful solution." Admiral Carter listened to the messages in silence. He thought about New Haven. He thought about the children who had been playing in the streets before the bombs fell. He thought about Commander Cole's final transmission, describing the murder of his people while the world burned around him. Private Cole stood at the observation window of the Liberty, watching the below. She was Cole's younger sister, just 23 years old. She had enlisted the day after she learned of her brother's death. She had trained harder than anyone in her unit. She had crossed the galaxy for this moment. Admiral Carter opened a channel to the... His voice was calm, but beneath the calm was something made of iron. "You offered no mercy to New Haven," he said. "You gave no warning to our children. You killed them because you believed we were beneath you. You believed that our lives did not matter. You believed wrong." His voice came back, desperate and pleading. "We can pay reparations. We can build monuments to your dead. Please, you must understand we can make this right." "You cannot bring back the dead," Carter replied. "You cannot give children back to their parents. You cannot undo what you have done. But you are right about one thing. We are not like you." He paused for a long moment. "We could destroy your world right now. We have the power to turn your cities to ash just as you did to ours. We could kill every man, woman, and child, and there would be nothing you could do to stop us. Some of my people want exactly that. They want revenge. They want you to feel what we felt." On Prime, millions held their breath. "But we are not monsters," Carter continued. "We did not come here to commit genocide. We came here to deliver justice. There is a difference." The human fleet began to move, not to attack, but to take positions around the planet. Landing craft descended toward the surface, carrying soldiers who would occupy key positions. The military installations were targeted first. Weapons platforms were destroyed. Command centers were captured. The ability of the to wage war was systematically eliminated. In the occupied territories throughout the Dominion, human forces arrived with a different message. 12 conquered species watched in amazement as human soldiers removed the governors and declared them free. Chains that had bound entire civilizations for centuries were broken in a matter of days. The people, who had been enslaved for 300 years, wept in the streets when human ships appeared in their sky. Whose culture had been nearly erased, embraced the human soldiers as liberators. Species that had forgotten what freedom felt like suddenly remembered. On Prime, the leaders were arrested one by one. Overseer was found hiding in his palace, surrounded by guards who surrendered without a fight. High Commander was captured at his command bunker, staring blankly at walls covered with maps of an empire that no longer existed. A galactic tribunal was established to try the leadership for crimes against sentient beings. Representatives from every species that had been conquered were invited to participate. For the first time, the victims would judge their oppressors. Private Cole was given a special honor. She was chosen to lower the flag above their Capitol building, the symbol of their dominion over the galaxy. As she climbed the steps, she thought of her brother. She thought of his calm voice in that final transmission. She thought of all the things he would never get to do, all the moments they would never share. She reached the top and took hold of the flag. For a moment she just stood there, looking out at the city that had celebrated the murder of her people. Then she pulled the flag down, slowly and deliberately. "This is for New Haven," she whispered. "This is for my brother. This is for every soul you took from us." She folded the flag carefully and handed it to the officer beside her. Then she raised a new flag, not a human flag, but a flag that represented all the free species of the galaxy. A flag that showed the universe had changed. Months later, a memorial was built on New Haven's surface. It was a wall of white stone, stretching for miles across the healed landscape. On that wall were carved the names of all 2.3 million victims. Every man, woman, and child who had died that day had their name preserved for eternity. Humans came from across the galaxy to pay their respects. They brought flowers and photographs. They stood in silence before the wall, reading names and remembering people they had never met but would never forget. Admiral Carter stood before the memorial on the day it was completed. Representatives from dozens of species had come to witness the ceremony. Cameras broadcast his words to every corner of the galaxy. "We are humanity," he said. "We came from a small blue world in an ordinary corner of the galaxy. We are not perfect. We fight among ourselves. We make mistakes. We are sometimes cruel and sometimes foolish. But we are family, all of us. And when someone harms our family, we do not rest until justice is served." He looked out at the crowd, at the humans and the aliens standing together. "Let every species in this galaxy understand what happened here. We did not come to conquer. We did not come to enslave. We came to show that actions have consequences. We came to free those who had been chained. We came to honor our dead and to make sure their sacrifice was not in vain." His voice grew softer. "To those we lost on New Haven, we remember you. We will always remember you. Your names are written in stone and your memory is written in our hearts. You deserved better. You deserved to live. We are sorry we could not save you, but we kept our promise. We answered for you." He stepped back from the podium. In the crowd, the alien ambassadors watched in silence. Some felt fear, knowing now what humanity was capable of. Some felt respect, understanding that these creatures would never be conquered. But all of them understood the same truth. Humanity was not to be underestimated. Humanity was not to be provoked. And humanity never, ever forgot its dead. The stars had witnessed many empires rise and fall. They had seen great powers emerge and vanish into dust. But they had never seen anything quite like this. A young species, wounded and grieving, had risen up and changed the galaxy. And somewhere in the vastness of space, other civilizations took note. They updated their records. They revised their assessments. They made sure their people understood one simple rule: do not touch humanity's children. Because if you do, 500,000 warships will come for you. And there will be nowhere in the universe to hide.